For 1,088 days, protesters manned this camp outside the illegal gypsy site at Meriden, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was back in March 2010 that the first caravans moved in, and there was soon hard standing and drainage, but no planning permission. In May, the protesters' camp began to take on an air of permanency as they prepared for the long haul. 2 months later, Solihull Borough Council officially refused the gypsies' planning permission. There was a public inquiry in March 2011. Finally, after years of legal wrangling, the last caravan moved off at the weekend. Joan Cummins has been following this story from the start.
At 10 o'clock this morning, 1,088 days after they'd first set up their illegal camp, residents of Meriden held a minute's silence for their elderly supporters who died in the 3 years that they'd battled for the Greenbelt.
To all of those, we thank you. We shall always remember you and cherish your memory.
The last of the gypsy families had left the site in Eves Green Lane on Saturday. Today it was the turn of the protesters to vacate their illegal encampment on the side of the road.
The camp has gone and will go shortly, but the campaign goes on. We will not rest until the Greenbelt is restored, until we've won any outstanding legal battles, and until this land is back in responsible ownership.
In October 2011, an illegal encampment at Dale Farm in Essex was cleared with bailiffs and police. Today, in the geographic middle of England, not a police officer in sight. Instead, some cake for the supporters who'd stood in the rain and snow.
It's just sad that it came to such a bitter battle, and they have to abide by the law the same as the rest of us.
Is it simply you don't want gypsies as neighbours?
That's right. Well, they're a nightmare. They're a nightmare, absolute nightmare.
The last of the gypsy families moved off the site over the weekend. They now have a month to start restoring the site back to how it was when they moved in 3 years ago. In the meantime, they've put it up for sale to the highest bidder. Noah Burton, who owns the land, wasn't available today, but last week he defended his actions, saying a lack of official sites had forced him into breaking planning regulations.
If you are the governing power and I say, can you find me somewhere to live, and for 40 years you do nothing, don't crucify me for trying.
The protesters are claiming a victory for Middle England, but perhaps the real losers are the taxpayers of Solihull, who spent almost £90,000 in legal fees fighting both sides in this planning row. Joan Cummins, BBC Midlands Today, Meriden.
The Traveller's Times is a magazine based in Hereford. Earlier I spoke to the editor Damien Labasse and started by asking him if it was time for gypsies to stop the tactic of buying land and then living there illegally.
This is a very small question of people actually doing that. There are over 15,000 gypsies and travellers sited on perfectly legal sites across the UK where they pay their council tax, their water rates, their bills, etc. There are about 3,000 more people who are on unauthorised sites, some of which are tolerated, some of which are not. Many of those are actually on land that they own, so I actually think that people are guilty of overblowing the question of gypsies and travellers pulling onto land illegally.
On the subject of new official sites for gypsies, what's happening on that front here in the West Midlands? Because you say it's not very common for people to set up illegal camps, but there aren't enough camps, are there?
There aren't enough legal pitches, no. I believe there are plans for up to 50 new pitches, perhaps even slightly more than that in the West Midlands coming over the next few years. But the problem is that for that to actually go ahead, we need to see some political will from local councillors who wish to help gypsies and travellers to resolve this issue of not having anywhere to pull their caravans.
Now, Meriden started just before a bank holiday. At Easter, travellers turned up at Stourport on 7. As we approach the May bank holidays, could we see more of the same across this region?
You know, people are, when they do this, whether it's a bank holiday or not, people are actually just trying to operate within the bounds of the planning system. Applying for planning permission retrospectively is a perfectly legitimate way of gaining it, which many people who are not gypsies and travellers take advantage of on a regular basis. So the idea that this is some kind of gypsy guerrilla tactic as it's painted in the mainstream media, I simply don't agree with that.
Damien Labasse from the Traveller's Times, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.